take a second and just hold your arm out in front of you. Lift, move it around a bit.
Yeah, try reaching out.
Right. Now, as you do that, your arm is essentially just floating in space. I mean, it is held to your body by a literal vacuum seal, a few sliding layers of muscle, and a bone no thicker than an espresso saucer. Welcome to another deep dive. Today, our mission is to basically completely dismantle the way you view your own physical anatomy.
We are entirely stepping away from that, the old mechanical industrial mindset, right? Where we just look at joints as these dumb hinges and levers.
Exactly. And our focus today comes from this remarkably poetic French anatomical guide by Dr. Christophe Delong, paired with some really fascinating biomechanical research from Kinexa. The guide is titled L'épaulosphère de tous les possibles, the shoulder, sphere of all possibilities. We are going to explore how your shoulder is actually the architect of your most eloquent gestures and, well, the ultimate gateway connecting you to the space around you.
Yeah, and framing it as an architect rather than just a hinge, I mean, it changes the entire paradigm. If we look at the human body philosophically, the hip joint is our root.
Like an anchor.
Exactly. It is a deep, secure socket that anchors us to the earth and gives us a solid foundation. But the shoulder, it does the exact opposite. It propels us outward into the world. It represents this brilliant, almost reckless evolutionary trade-off.
Reckless how?
Well, we have completely sacrificed robust, impenetrable stability for what the researchers at Kinexa call a vertiginous amplitude, which is just an extreme, dizzying level of spatial mobility.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to truly understand how the shoulder achieves that sweeping freedom, we have to look at the skeletal architecture. And reading through these notes, the design feels paradoxical. It almost feels like an engineering mistake just waiting to happen.
It really does look like one on paper.
Right, like let's look at the shoulder blade, the scapula. The text refers to it as a floating wing. It sits on your back. It can glide 10 to 12 centimeters vertically. That's almost half a ruler's length of movement right under your skin. And it can rotate up to 60 degrees. Yet it has absolutely no direct bony track attaching it to your ribcage. It is essentially just hydroplaning over your back.
It is entirely suspended. It glides over the thorax in this silent, frictionless dance. And the only reason it doesn't just slide right off your back is the tension of the muscles holding it in orbit.
Wow.
And then we have the clavicle, your collarbone. This is an S-shaped bridge acting like a tense bow across your chest. The stunning part of our anatomy here is that the single, delicate, curved bone is the sole rigid connection between your entire arm and the central trunk of your skeleton.
Wait.
It functions as a pivot point, allowing for 50 degrees of axial rotation.
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that. You're saying if I throw a really heavy punch or catch myself falling, the only actual bone-to-bone anchor keeping my arm attached to my skeleton is that thin little collarbone.
That is the only true skeletal anchor.
Are you serious?
Completely. Everything else relies on soft tissue.
Which brings us to the upper arm bone, the humerus. The top of the humerus is a perfectly spherical head, roughly 45 to 50 millimeters across. But the cavity it sits in, the glenoid, is incredibly shallow. It's like 3 times smaller than the head itself. It's the anatomical equivalent of trying to balance a tennis ball on an espresso saucer.
That is exactly what it looks like.
But why would nature design our most frequently used heavy lifting limb to be so incredibly unstable? Isn't that asking for, constant dislocations?
Well, it seems totally counterintuitive when we are so used to building rigid structures. But this is a deliberate sacrifice. The body willingly abandons structural safety to satisfy an insatiable thirst for space and movement.
So it wants the range.
Exactly. If that saucer were deeper, wrapping around the humerus like a true ball and socket joint, your arm would be incredibly stable. But you wouldn't be able to reach behind your back to put on a jacket, you wouldn't be able to paint a massive canvas, and you certainly couldn't wind up to throw a baseball. You need that sphere to be slightly precarious so it can constantly seek out more space to express itself.
Okay, so because we are walking around with this highly precarious tennis ball on a saucer design, the body has to perform some magic to compensate. One single joint can't safely hold this together. The Kinexa research describes a complex federation of 5 distinct joints.
5 of them, yeah.
They all have to work in absolute concert just to keep your arm from falling off. I want to understand how they actually pull this off. Let's start with the main one, the glenohumeral joint. This is the saucer itself. The bone coverage is only about 25 to 30%. So what is actually keeping the ball from just rolling off the plate?
A literal
A
vacuum.
vacuum, like suction.
Exactly. Because the bone is so shallow, nature installed a ring of cartilaginous tissue called the labrum right around the rim of the saucer. This ring acts like an industrial suction cup. It creates a negative internal pressure of -4 to -6 millimeters of mercury.
That is mind-blowing.
Think of pulling a plunger off a smooth floor. That resistance is negative pressure. This vacuum acts as a silent valve of equilibrium. It constantly pulls the sphere into the center of the saucer without needing bulky, restrictive bone to lock it in place.
Held on by suction. But if I pick up a heavy suitcase, surely a vacuum seal isn't enough to stop my arm from just tearing away. There has to be a physical tether somewhere.
Right, and that is where the second joint in the federation comes in, the sternocostoclavicular joint. This is where your collarbone meets your sternum, right at the base of your throat. As we established earlier, this is the foundational pillar, the single rigid anchor to your core skeleton.
So the force travels up.
Yes. When you lift that heavy suitcase, the force travels up your arm, across the vacuum seal, and channels straight through the collarbone into this singular pivot point.
Okay, and right at the other end of that collarbone, sitting above the shoulder, is the third joint, the acromioclavicular joint. The text calls this one a silent guardian, but honestly, it seems more like the tragic hero of the shoulder. This is the crossroads where almost all the mechanical stress converges.
It takes a lot of punishment.
Yeah, according to Dr. DeLong's guide, because it bears the brunt of our heavy lifting and overhead reaching, it often starts showing serious wear and tear like arthritis as early as 40 or 50 years old.
It really acts as the shock absorber for the entire upper limb. Over decades of lifting and reaching, the cartilage there just compresses and thins out. But it's a necessary wear and tear to protect the much more delicate structures underneath.
Right. Now we get to the fourth joint, the scapulothoracic joint. The guide labels it a false joint. There is no cartilage here, no fluid-filled capsule like a normal joint. It is literally just two thick rivers of muscle sliding over each other. It sounds like tectonic plates shifting right over the rib cage.
Tectonic plates is a perfect visual for it. Because it's not bound by ligaments in the traditional sense, this false joint allows the shoulder blade to glide in almost any direction, which provides a moving platform for the arm to operate from.
And finally, the fifth element in this federation, which the guide calls the sacred tunnel, the subacromial space. This is utterly terrifying to me.
It's incredibly delicate.
It's a tiny gap beneath the collarbone structure, only 9 to 10 millimeters wide. A crucial tendon from your rotator cuff has to slide back and forth through this tunnel every time you move your arm. I need you to explain the mechanics here, because the text says if this space reduces by just 2 millimeters, the entire flying machine is grounded. How does 2 millimeters cause so much havoc?
Well, consider what happens when you slouch over a computer screen. Your posture rounds, and your shoulder blade actually tilts forward. That subtle tilt physically lowers the bony ceiling of the sacred tunnel. Suddenly, that 9 millimeter gap becomes 7 millimeters. The tendon sliding through it starts rubbing against the bone above it. It frays, it inflames, and it swells.
Making the space even smaller.
Exactly. That swelling further reduces the space, creating a severe mechanical conflict. Every time you try to lift your arm, the tendon gets physically pinched between two bones. The pain is blinding, and your mobility is completely lost, all because a microscopic architectural clearance was compromised.
I have to pause and just process this. Aside from one tiny, rigid bone at the base of my throat, my arm is essentially a free-floating apparatus. It is tethered to my body by tectonic plates of sliding muscle and an internal vacuum seal. And the entire system can be brought to its knees if bad posture closes a tunnel by 2 millimeters.
You are relying entirely on microscopic tolerances. It is an exquisite suspension system. Because the skeletal architecture offers virtually no safety net, the system requires a team of hyper-precise, invisible architects to constantly orchestrate the tension and keep those tolerances intact.
Which perfectly brings us to the muscles. The bones are floating, so the muscles can't act like dumb cables just yanking a hinge back and forth. They have to be incredibly intelligent. The primary architects here are the muscles of the rotator cuff. Their main job isn't even lifting the arm, is it? It's keeping the humerus perfectly centered on that tiny saucer within a margin of plus or minus 2 millimeters.
They are the close guard of the shoulder. Let's look at the physics they're actually dealing with. You have the supraspinatus sitting right on top. Its job is to initiate the lifting of your arm, To do that without the bone slipping off the saucer, it has to apply between 100 and 150 newtons of force straight down into the joint.
Straight down.
Straight down. To put that in perspective, that is the equivalent of holding a 35-pound dumbbell suspended in the air, just to compress the joint enough to keep it stable while you lift an empty hand.
35 pounds of pressure just to hold the joint together while I lift my arm? That is wild. And because of this immense pressure, it unfortunately suffers 80% of all rotator cuff tears, right?
It does. It takes a massive beating.
And the other 3 muscles in the cuff are doing equally heavy lifting.
They are. The infraspinatus sits on the back and generates massive torque. If you throw a ball, this muscle generates 15 to 20 newton meters of rotational force. That is similar to the torque you'd apply tightening a lug nut on a car tire.
Just to slow the arm down.
Exactly, just to decelerate your arm and stop it from flying out of the socket. On the front, you have the subscapularis acting as an anterior shield, applying up to 250 newtons of force to prevent the shoulder from popping forward. And finally, the teres minor, a tiny muscle no larger than a postage stamp, handles the finest, most delicate external rotations.
Here's where it gets really interesting. These 4 muscles don't just fire all at once. They participate in a highly choreographed dance with the bones, which the Kinexa research calls the scapulohumeral rhythm. To lift your arm all the way up to the ceiling, a full 180 degrees, the body uses a strict 2-to-1 ratio. Your arm bone moves 120 degrees, and your shoulder blade has to rotate the remaining 60 degrees.
It's a very elegant distribution of labor.
It made me think of a massive construction crane. You have the operator sitting in the cab, which is the shoulder blade and the long arm of the crane. They have to have this telepathic partnership. As the arm reaches out, the cab has to lean back and pivot to counterbalance it, passing the mechanical baton back and forth in 4 distinct phases. So my question is, if one of these tiny invisible architect muscles gets fatigued or inflamed, does this entire 2-to-1 ratio just completely collapse?
Actually, the brain actively intervenes before collapse can even happen.
Yeah.
This reveals the underlying survival logic of the body. The nervous system prioritizes that plus or minus 2 millimeter, centering over absolutely everything else.
Everything.
Everything. Over your overall strength, over your mobility, and certainly over your conscious desire to reach for something on a high shelf. If the sensory nerves detect that the stability is wavering, or if they sense that the sacred tunnel is narrowing and a tendon is at risk of tearing, the brain acts like a circuit breaker.
A circuit breaker?
Yes. It actively inhibits the electrical signals to your muscles. It literally shuts off the power.
Wait, so when someone has a frozen shoulder or they just can't lift their arm past a certain point, it's not necessarily because the muscle is broken or too weak to lift the arm. It's because the brain pulled the plug to save the joint from destroying itself.
Precisely. The body dictates a strict hierarchy. Stability must be mathematically assured before force can be produced, and force must be safely managed before maximum amplitude is allowed. If stability fails, the brain locks the system down to prevent catastrophic skeletal failure.
That neurological circuit breaker concept changes everything. It means this precise 2-to-1 crane dance and the microscopic centering of the bones requires a hyper-advanced communication network. The shoulder actually has to think.
Yeah, we are crossing the bridge from pure biomechanics into neurobiology here. The shoulder relies heavily on proprioception. Dr. Delong's text beautifully refers to proprioception as our 6th sense.
Proprioception. For those who haven't heard the term, it's the body's ability to know exactly where it is in 3-dimensional space without using vision. It's the reason you can scratch the back of your head or blindly reach for your coffee mug on the desk without having to stare at your arm while it executes the movement. Thousands of microscopic sensors in the tendons and ligaments are constantly sending tension and position data up to your brain.
It is a continuous high-speed loop of sensory and motor feedback. The brain instantly integrates thousands of data points to adjust the tension of those 4 rotator cuff muscles on the fly, making sure the humerus never drifts outside that 2 millimeter safety zone. And because of this intense, constant neurological dialogue, something remarkable happens over a lifetime. The guide refers to it as asymmetrical specialization.
I love this part of the source material. It argues that we literally sculpt our shoulders through our daily habits. The book breaks this down into 2 specific categories of human expression. First, you have the cultivated gesture. This is all about extreme precision and refinement. Think of a concert violinist's bowing arm. Over years of practice, the shoulder develops this exquisite, nuanced proprioceptive map to control the exact pressure and angle of the sound. Or consider a painter's fluid brush stroke, or a calligrapher whose shoulder instantly translates abstract thought into physical form on paper.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have latent force. This isn't about delicate precision. It's about structural support and explosive power. Picture the serving arm of a professional tennis player optimized for sudden, violent torque,
Right.
or the resilient, repetitive, axe-swinging arm of a lumberjack, or a stonemason who develops incredible isometric endurance in their shoulder just to carry heavy loads of brick all day without the vacuum seal failing. The body neurologically reinforces whatever movement pattern it is forced to execute repeatedly.
So, what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? Most of us are not lumberjacks or concert violinists. Let's say you just sit at a desk all day. Does your right mouse-clicking shoulder physically develop a completely different neurological map and a different muscular shape than your left shoulder?
What's fascinating here is that the answer is undeniably yes. Our repetitive daily intentions literally forge the biological reality of our joints. The shoulder is highly adaptable. It doesn't just age, it records.
It records. Wow.
Yeah, every click of the mouse, every hour you spend slumped forward looking at your phone, you are sending a neurological signal that tells the shoulder, this closed forward posture is the shape we need to hold permanently. This limited range of motion is all we require. And the body efficiently obliges. It reinforces the shortened muscles and weakens the stabilizers. It writes your daily autobiography directly into your anatomy.
It is writing your autobiography into your anatomy. That is incredible and honestly a little terrifying. If our shoulders adapt so powerfully to whatever mundane things we ask of them, how do we make sure we are maintaining this sphere of possibilities? How do we ensure the shoulder remains a tool for sweeping human expression rather than letting it permanently freeze into a source of pain?
Well, it requires a fundamental paradigm shift in how we treat our bodies. The text explicitly states that we must shift from a mindset of mechanically repairing the shoulder to a mindset of consciously feeling the shoulder. We need to cultivate this fear through awareness rather than trying to hammer it into shape with heavy weights.
Cultivating the sphere. The text gives some very specific, surprisingly gentle practices to achieve this. It doesn't recommend bench pressing or aggressive stretching. Instead, it suggests simply harmonizing your breath with slight shoulder elevations. You just let the shoulders slowly rise on the inhale and fall on the exhale to naturally release diaphragm tension.
It's remarkably simple but effective.
It also talks about an exercise called wall angels. You stand with your back against a wall and slowly slide your arms up and down, making sure your elbows and wrists stay in contact with the wall the whole time. This forces the rib cage to open and corrects that forward tilt that ruins the sacred tunnel. The focus is on slow, fluid, mindful rotations to naturally lubricate the joint.
The intention behind those gentle movements is crucial. The goal is to stimulate the production of synovial fluid to lubricate the joint, and more importantly, to reestablish that proprioceptive neurological map. You are reminding the brain of the full range of motion it has access to, rather than forcing the muscles into submission through heavy resistance.
It's like tuning a priceless Stradivarius violin. You wouldn't just pour thick industrial oil into the gears to make it play louder. You have to listen to the acoustics and adjust the tension delicately. It sounds like the primary goal isn't necessarily getting stronger, but getting significantly more aware of the spatial volume your shoulder occupies.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, take the moment to simply inhabit your shoulders is profoundly important. Dr. Delong calls this the awakening of bodily consciousness. When you just sit quietly, close your eyes, and actively feel the weight of your shoulders resting on your ribcage.
Just feeling the tension.
Exactly. When you actively listen to the internal sensations of tension, you are actively re-engaging that proprioceptive network. You are telling your brain to pay attention to that plus or minus 2 millimeter centering. That internal awareness is the absolute first step to deep bodily autonomy. It keeps the shoulder functioning not just as a mechanical linkage, but as the ultimate artistic tool capable of the sweeping dramatic emotion of a symphony conductor, or the gravity-defying lightness of a ballet dancer's port-de-bras.
It really is a silent symphony happening just under our skin. To think that every time you reach out to hug a friend, wave hello across the street, or just stretch your arms when you wake up, you are relying on 5 floating joints, 17 different sliding muscles, a literal vacuum seal, and a lightning-fast neurological network, all working in flawless harmony to grant you spatial freedom.
It is the ultimate physical bridge between your internal will and the external world. And because we now know that our repetitive daily actions literally sculpt both the physical musculature and the sensory map of our shoulders over time, it leaves us with a vital question.
I love a good question to end on.
What kind of unseen sculpture are you building in your own shoulders right now based on your daily habits? Are you neurologically forging the resilient, expansive shoulder of an artist or a builder? Or are you slowly sculpting the frozen, restricted shoulder of someone simply hunched over a glowing screen? The architecture is yours to command.